So, hello, my friends, and welcome to Quartet. So nice to have you with us. It's a sunshiny day here in Berkeley Springs in the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. I'm joined by two of our quartet members, Greg Braden and Frank Jacob. Greg, how are you, my friend?
I am I am doing so good today. I'm coming to you from Neil Young used to call this a cold bowl of chili when you get up to a morning like we've got now. So it's cold and snowy here in northern New Mexico, and I'm happy to be in this warm conversation.
And Frank Jacob, it's again nice to have you with us here.
Good to be here, John. And just like you, Greg, I'm here experiencing freezing frosty temperatures, which crept in. Maybe you sent them over. That's probably what happened, I
Yeah,
think. Yeah.
right.
We went from +9 Celsius to -9 and 4 inches of snow literally within 12 hours. So it's been interesting.
Wow,
Yeah,
wow.
it's another conspiracy. Yes, sir. Yeah. So, as might be apparent, I'm not in my office today because we've lost the internet. So, coming here directly from the country and downtown West Virginia, and see how long the battery on my computer works holds forth today. And this might be an abbreviated session, but nice to have you all here. Let's go around and Greg, let's start with you. What you've been thinking about, my friend?
What I'm really watching right now is the buildup of troops in the Middle East. I think we're looking at a very good possibility of an escalation and what's happening there. And I'll save the rest of what's on my mind for our topic today
Yeah,
because we're going to talk about current events.
yeah, good. Thank you, Frank. What you been thinking about?
Well, I've been trying to just kind of keep up with the changes that are going on over there in the United States with you guys. You've got some development with the IRS, which I guess we could talk about, and it's all sort of, part of what's looking like a miraculous turnaround of events. And so the question for me that's going around in my head is it really truly something miraculous that we can trust? Or what are we missing? And there's a lot of indications that I'm seeing that there's parts that are missing that we're not being told about. Maybe we can touch on some of those today.
Yeah, well,
Well,
that's inevitable. That's the
yeah.
way the system works, I'm afraid. Yeah, I think you're right on there. I neglected to mention that Penny Kelly isn't with us today. She got stuck trying to hit some deadlines, and so she'll be back with us next time. And so we'll soldier on here without our friend Penny. So let's just move into our topic and our subject of today, and it's really about current events. This is uh, a wild and crazy and irrational and enigmatic and whatever kind of time, and it just seems to accelerate and get worse by the day. So maybe Frank, we can start with you and say what you've been thinking about in terms of kind of other aspects of what's happening in the world today.
Well, in looking at this latest thing that I just caught, it just caught my eye about the IRS that the Doge members are pounding on the door kind of thing. The way they present the imagery is very interesting. Makes it sound like they're ransacking the building and taking over, right? So and knowing a little bit about the Federal Reserve and the monetary system and the history of the monetary system in the United States, it makes you wonder how valid or viable that really is. And so the question that comes up is, are these moves that are coming obviously from the executive branch of the United States government, are they legit? Are they actually something which could have been done at any time? Or I think as most people who are asleep or not really realizing or taking full advantage of their ability to have a transparent look at the way their government functions, just not aware that these things have always been there for the option to execute, right? To do something about. Because I think most people have this idea that the Federal Reserve and the IRS, which is of course tied to it, are this invincible, untouchable force in the United States. But it's really interesting. There's this new documentary series that's being put out by John Titus, and it's on Solaris, and it just started, and it's going to be like this 8-part series. And I had a peek at it the other day, And he basically makes it clear that no, the Fed isn't this inviolable, untouchable organization. It's very well, very distinctly and discreetly scripted into the Constitution that that Congress and only Congress has the power to, it's like they're the landlord and the Fed are the tenants, right? They could kick him out anytime they wanted from one day to the next. So these are things that are very, very empowering and empowering to know for people. But the question is, do people know really that it's, is this something that it's coming from the people that are really empowered to do it? Is this their decision? Or is this a decision by a very small group of executives? And I think you alluded to that. You wanted to know that, meet the person who's kind of behind some of these moves. But if you look at what they're trying to replace all of these Doge exposures with, which means minimizing the waste, getting rid of useless employees that are just sitting there sucking off of the system. They want to replace it with AI. And so you've got Sam Altman, you've got Larry Elliott, you've got Elon Musk, obviously, JD Vance, Peter Thiel. You've got all these guys that are really that team, that, marvelous team everyone's talking about, that are behind it. But what are their motivations? And these people are distinctly technocrats, which means that they want to push AI into the forefront, and that's kind of what everyone's been talking about anyway. So are we moving now into this completely dominated AI society, starting with the government, and is this a good thing? Right? So those are the big questions. It could be a good thing, but it could also be an absolute nightmare.
Yeah, interesting, provocative points. Greg, what do you think?
What we're seeing in the world right now, the current events, they're not random. They are structured. There is a sequence that is unfolding. There's a process that's in play that has a beginning and an end. We're in it. The only way out of it is to go through it. And as a systems thinker, when I step back, I'm just going to step through a couple of things. We've touched on this briefly in some other quartets. If we look at what's happening in the world, as a geologist, when I look at the UN and the WEF and the climate goals that they are pushing, if we were to meet every one of those goals, what we have is a world that's not good for humans. What we have is CO2 levels pushed back to 180 parts per million is near extinction level, 150 to 180 parts per million. They want to push us back to 212, which is just about 32 points away from extinction. I mean, this is, they want to push the average global temperature down from 56 Fahrenheit to 46 Fahrenheit. As a geologist, I can tell you the last time we saw that was the Pleistocene era in geologic history. It was not good for life. It was not good for human life. All right, so that's happening. Now we look at the encouragement to create conflict and war between superpowers. And what we're effectively doing is depleting the human ability to fight. We're depleting the armaments. Now, the US, it says we're down to about 3 to 5 years it's going to take to replace the conventional armaments that we have given to Israel and to Ukraine. We are depleting the manpower that has the ability to fight a war. We are weakening the defense systems of our planet en masse, and that's not good for us. And then we begin looking at what is happening in society and the concerted effort to break the social bonds that have always held families and communities and societies together. And sadly, it has been relatively effective. We began with the rich against the poor, then blacks against whites, Christians against Muslims, Jews against Muslims, men against women. Now we're moving in a very personal level, male and female and gender. What kind of a man am I? What kind of a woman am I? And all of these are breaking the social bonds. Religion, they're going after religion. The Catholic Church is in disarray right now as all of the secrets are being revealed. All of this is not good for humans. There is a process, and this could be a whole conversation unto itself. What we see is that the powers that be have identified something that they call the event. The event, they don't identify it specifically, but everything that we're seeing happening in the world is in support of the event, which is targeted for around the year 2030. Breaking the social bonds makes society vulnerable and susceptible to the agendas and the ideas of other people, and we're seeing that happen. There are proposals now to create a new religion that is AI driven, that is inclusive of all of the religious ideas, doing away with all of the individual religions. So when we see the events, the centralization, and with fewer people, with the mechanization, with the robotics, and just 2 weeks ago, the World Economic Forum finished their annual Davos meeting, and it's no secret. I mean, they restated very clearly their goal by the year 2030 is to merge our physical world with our digital world with our biological world. The only way to accomplish that is to change us from within by merging us with technology that makes us vulnerable to and susceptible to centralization, power, and control. So with that in mind, everything that we're seeing, and Frank, you nailed it. My sense, I don't have a crystal ball and I don't have a hotline to the people that we're talking about, but my sense is that the event is very closely related to the awakening realization of our relationship to a greater cosmic family. John, you allude to the incoming cosmic information that is shifting us. And so that's the other piece. In the presence of all the efforts to change our world and change our bodies, we're waking up to the deep truth of who we are and what it means to be human. And so the events of the world are reflecting these two parallel paths. I'll stop there, but this is kind of the way I'm coming at it, rather than looking at one-offs.
Yeah.
How are they supporting the movement toward the preparation for whatever the event is?
Well, I agree with you completely in that there's some downstream event of great significance that is explicit in the minds of those who are what? The controllers, uh, the deep state, call them what you are, because there is an urgency, a growing urgency that is not being driven by nothing. So there is that. The other thing that you need to keep in mind here, I think, is this uh, sovereign debt crisis that Martin Armstrong in particular talks about, and that this is a, a date certain, um, somewhere 2027, 2028, where the whole financial system hits the wall. And it's impossible to either pay the debt or issue new currency. And what happens in the United States in particular is that Social Security goes away. That is to say, nobody gets paid. There's Social Security, Medicare goes away. The pension funds all fail because the laws associated with the governing assets held by pension funds have dictated that something like 70% of the assets had to be held in government securities, presumably because they were so safe. Well, they're not so safe now, and they can't get out of them. And so CalPERS, the California very large pension fund, the largest one in the country, I believe, is looking at bankruptcy essentially because they cannot extract themselves from these organizing constraints. And so all of that is you could back that in to potentially say that one of the reasons, not the only one, but one of the reasons why Trump and his administration is doing this, clean sweep out of the middle of the government is because they are trying to reduce uh, the overhead in the government that is contributing in its own way toward the timing associated with the collapse of this financial system. At some point in that process, they start looking around saying, well, what do I have that is of value that I can convert into some kind of cash? And so in the case of the Soviet Union, they started, selling missiles on the side or making the secrets available, and that's what's going to happen, I think, and it's already started. Some of it was suggested in the United States, for instance, in terms of USAID and getting rid of the USAID, and suddenly it's on the front page. Something that many of us kind of knew but didn't talk much about is that the USAID was nothing but a front for the CIA, and that they were using it to essentially control most of the media in the world. And so now it becomes a secret that's been revealed, and it starts, and this becomes incremental. I mean, you're only 2 years away from this financial system hitting the wall. And if they can't collapse the whole thing and reset it with digital currency and reduce their overhang, the trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars that they can't pay, then it's a direct line to a revolution.
Yeah.
And whether it's a global revolution or certainly a national revolution, then anyway, you're on your way to a complete wholesale turnover of the whole system. And so to come full circle, I mean, that's what Trump and his guys, someplace in there, they understand that this thing is all coming apart in a hurry, and they've got to do everything they can in order to keep it together. Uh, uh, the nice, the cherry on the top of this whole thing is that you're going to get a new world, and you're going to get a chance to literally build a new country. And that's something that we at the Arlington Institute are particularly interested in.
Well, if I can jump in a little on that, there's a lot you covered a lot of areas, and I'm thinking like, how would I respond to some of that stuff? And there's two things kind of going on in parallel, the way I see it. There's the mystical aspect, and then there's the pragmatic, materialistic aspect of it. On the biblical or spiritual, let's just say, part of it, all of this is playing into this script that we've been programmed with of a showdown, some kind of an apocalypse that's going to happen. And I'm convinced that whether you believe in an apocalypse, whether you're Jewish, Christian, Muslim, it doesn't matter. All of us, even atheists, have heard that script running for decades or our whole lives, pretty much. And so some form of meltdown is kind of pre-programmed into the expectations of our consciousness, and we're beings that create. We're creator beings, so we can create that cataclysm, and we can also avert it depending on mass consciousness, on where we are with our consciousness. It's always a thing of human consciousness, the way I see it. Even with the idea of capitalism, the idea of capitalism is as a bad thing. But if you're practicing ethical capitalism based on your level of consciousness, meaning you voluntarily give something back, then is it really such a bad thing? And so, what you're talking about with Trump and his people preparing with crypto and things for this worst case scenario makes total sense, because literally, if you look at the actual materialistic side of things, you've got a system that's living in complete denial. And for them to turn into some kind of a crypto model is perfect timing, because if and when the system collapses, they're going to position themselves to be in the best possible place to be able to then usher in the new structure of society the way they see it. And those people who have lost everything and who weren't prepared are going to have to accept some kind of a form of this new system that they want to create, right? So with that going on, I mean, there's a big factor in this is really coming down to this Fed power thing, because the difference here between Europe, and you mentioned the German government, and yeah, it's completely lost confidence. People, it doesn't really have the right. They're just squatters at this point, sitting in the office, and nobody's given them any authority, but they've just usurped that authority. And they can do it to an extent because they're connected to the power players that are running the central bank. And the EU and in other countries in the world, central banks run everything, meaning they're private. They don't answer to governments. They own the governments. The United States is the one company or company actually, but The one the one country where this doesn't necessarily have to be true because the Fed isn't all powerful. And if people wake up to that, and they abolish it. I mean, when you think about the debt and the collapse of society, well, who owns the debt, right? It's actually that private Federal Reserve that created that debt because it got us weaned into taking debt as a way of living. Now, if we can literally in the United States, if you can abolish or just cancel the Fed, meaning you can even cancel the debt, print a new currency and start all over, well, where is the crisis then? Is there really a crisis then? Or is the crisis one that's been overlaid on top of us to think that we are living in this massive debt crisis? It isn't necessarily true. I think these are some of the questions that we have coming. And the final aspect to the spiritual thing that I've noticed is, looking at the end times. I was doing some research and preparation, like you were, Greg, and I was looking at Revelations, and you look at the rise of something called the beast. And, there's all kinds of references in the Bible to the beast being this, representing this evil system that is going to have everyone under their control. But what's interesting is because I've been delving into Gnosticism, is that there's another definition of the beast, and the beast is actually living. It's a living creature, it's an animal, it's not the machine. And they've tried to usurp and twist that meaning to be something that represents this idea of total domination via machine. But actually, it might actually be the rise of the animal, the kingdom, the natural kingdom, the kingdom of the world, the natural world that we still want to preserve, that we're moving away, trying to prevent from moving into transhumanism. So right now, it's like this showdown between those who are wanting transhumanism, who are pushing their versions of revelation onto us, and those who are kind of waking up and going, wait a minute, that really doesn't have to be true. And so the deciding factor on whether what's going on with Trump and his team is really an organic thing that is for the benefit of the people will be the level of transparency to their actions. So if they lay out their game plan and their strategy to us and say this is where we want to go and this is what has to be done and this is how we're going to take care of everybody, they're going to have it'll be a much different picture than if they preserve this idea of secrecy. And by all accounts, if you look at the people around Trump, they're heavily tied into the apocalyptic scenario of the biblical play out of the script. So I don't necessarily believe that their intention is to be totally transparent.
It's very clear in some of the ancient texts. And the earth is being prepared for whatever form of life is best suited by low carbon dioxide, cool temperatures, a tightly controlled population based on technology. I think that's exactly what we're seeing happen. And for that to happen, we have to have a collapse of economies by design, because it is that collapse that opens the door to the new centralized economy. And whether or not we have a currency, I don't know that we even have a currency, and new ideas of power and control.
What this requires is an alternative vision, is an alternative path to a different kind of future. And so uh, that's part of why I'm energized around the idea of trying to build a global kind of initiative to begin to think specifically about kind of the organizing principles, the values, the assumptions about what a new world might look like, I think, in this case. And I'd love to have somebody with an alternative suggestion, but in the short term, at least, we're trying to think about how you build a new world.
Well, John, what you're saying is that's precisely, we're seeing two parallel societies emerge from the chaos, the changes that we're seeing. One society that's all in on everything, all the tech and everything, and another society that is uh, not rejecting the technology, but allowing it to serve us rather than enslave us. I used to want to believe that we would all get to the new world together, and now it's obvious that we're not all going to go together. And yet, I think that we can all learn from one another. Those that choose the tech path are going to check out those that didn't, and they're going to say, who's happier? Whose children are better adjusted, who is healthier, who's living longer, whose lives are more fulfilled, and that will inform them in terms of choices that they make if they have enough cognition still available after the transhuman shifts in their bodies, if they have enough cognition to even be able to recognize those qualities of human life.
Well, and all I'd suggest to you is this is accelerating into a new space, and you don't have much time. And my guess is it's about 2 years. The kid, you might be able if you catch this thing and get going in a new direction, then you can start to build a new generation of kids that think differently. But this is in our face and really important.
Well, you'd wonder, like, the way people are hyping technology and AI, was it, like if you look into the past, like was humanity ever able to survive without all that technology? And yes, absolutely. We have all this innate hidden functionality which we don't even acknowledge, which is far superior to an AI kind of an existence. AI should only ever really be supplementary to what we have. We shouldn't need AI to live and thrive on this planet. And in fact, one of the maybe benefits of the Flash, it depends on what form this Flash takes, right? In our film Solar Revolution, we talked about kind of the Hunab coup and this increased energy coming from the center of the universe, which is being registered. This intense energy that's taking on qualities in our bodies that maybe is going to trigger a change within our genetics. That's all natural part of the whole cosmos versus this artificial idea of a flash. I mean, what if the flash is an EMP, a massive EMP from the sun? Well, that would pretty much take care, I think, of any of the of the AI stuff, save for those people who have maybe stashed it in their bunkers, and it might, serve to rebuild something. But hey, the setback will be instantaneously and palpable because we'll have to resort to those natural capabilities that we have, and that memory will have to come forward. What we are as human beings, what we really are, right?
Yeah, what from that perspective, what does an EMP mean to the technology that you've accepted into your body? What does
Right.
it mean? What does it mean to a microprocessor in your brain, or the nanotechnology that's circulating through your cardiovascular system? And people don't think about things like that. This is not new. We have at least three generations of young people who have been indoctrinated to to denigrate the human body, to believe that we are a flawed species, that we're weak and powerless, that we need something outside of ourselves. And those are my live events. I just had 2 weeks ago. We had young people there who see absolutely no reason not to accept all the tech into their bodies. So, but they're looking at it, I had a young man, can't, well, I say young, I'd say he was probably 16, 17 years old. And he said, wait a minute, Mr. Braden, let me see if I got this straight. All I have to do is put this computer chip in my brain and I can play Grand Theft Auto without ever touching the keyboard and no cables between me and the computer. Sweet, bring it on.
Right.
Why not? Because they've never been taught of the sanctity of the human body, the sacredness of the human body, where we truly come from, and they are given no reason to preserve and protect the human body, and they're seeing it just as a mechanism, a tool to help them achieve some level of satisfaction in their lives.
So
So
let's do
that's
something here
we're up
because we
against.
don't have much time left. Can we run down that track a little bit, Greg? So what is it that convinces and shows individuals, young people in this particular case? The,
I've been doing this for a couple of
I
years.
know, that's why I'm
Yeah, but
asking.
I just want to say we've got new studies. I mean, this is rock solid science coming out of Stanford
Yeah, but how
University,
do you
and
convince a kid that wants to play Grand Theft Auto? I
this is
mean,
what we
we're
do.
okay.
We've got studies comparing a human brain to a microprocessor. And you do that by comparing the synapses in the brain to the transistors on the microprocessor. And interestingly, it's about the same number. Our brain has about the same number of synapses as the most advanced microprocessors, not counting the quantum microprocessors. And what the outcome of the study is, we are 100-fold more efficient at the processing and the abilities that we have than the chip. We are scalable beyond anything that we know, where the chip is
I know.
finite. And the young kids, they look at that and they said they've always been taught the chip is a god. And now
Yeah.
they're looking at
But
their own
that
bodies.
convinces them. That convinces them
I
by
don't
it.
know how. So here's what the one of the guys told me. He says, Mr. Braden, this makes perfect sense in this room with these people. When I go to school, none of
Right.
my friends think this way. And so they're dealing with peer pressure as well as dealing with the facts they've just been confronted with.
And the
Well,
rest
maybe
of the
it
world.
has to do with refining the magic of what it is to be an analog human being, and what it means
How
to
do you do
interact
that?
with human beings. And the way you do it is you get together with people. When I was growing up, we used to still go out in our little groups of people, and we'd go walking into the woods, and we'd play some, fantasy game of our own volition. We had to invent things, and it was riveting because we were involved in it. We were invested in it. We were invested emotionally in the bond between us and between the scenario that we invented, just the way that video game players are invested in whether they're going to be able to beat the next person that they're going to confront in the game, the player or the non-game player or whatever. So I think it's just a shift of perception is to reintroduce maybe to a degree those people to that world as well, not eliminating maybe the digital game world because it's going to be pretty tough to convince, all these people that are, addicted really to this game world to leave it. But I think the magic of analog um, can be shown. I mean, just look at as an example, digital music, right? MP3s. I mean, they're crap, MP3s slice music up into little pieces, and they try to emulate what it would sound like in a highly compressed version if it was playing from a record. What is a record? It's an analog form of capture of sound waves in an uninterrupted flow from the creator right to the vinyl. There's been no interruption. It's just formatted into different forms of matter, but there's no simulation, there's no estimate, there's no algorithm. It's actually a natural form, and it has a completely different effect on the human brain as digital music does. Just for example, right? So this is and you can see the repopularity of vinyl even in the world practically. I mean, vinyl is kind of cool again. Vinyl is sacred. And this is just one little example. This is a PR problem, I think, more than anything else. We just need people that are showing the world these other alternatives. Unfortunately, we have the majority leaning in the WEF direction, the transhumanist direction, but I don't think it's an invincible or impossible task. We just need to get going on it. And what you're doing, John, with the idea of the Arlington Institute is to kind of create a new form of at least a structure for a new society that thinks along those terms and offers also some of these alternatives, right?
Yeah,
You
well,
know,
the point that I was kind of trying to elicit from you is that the notion of there's a brand, there's a new product here, essentially, if you wanted to look at it in commercial terms. There's an alternative to the status quo, and it has some kind of coherence. It has colors. It's got shape. It's got something. It's got a brand name and a tagline that says what this new world is. What's the essence of what this is that relates directly to individuals in their lives? Because somewhere there's a new idea in here. I promise you.
hmm.
Somewhere there's an emergent new idea about what this new world is. That turns on a light and everybody says, yeah, that could work. That could, and it'd really be great to play with that a little bit next time.
This is a very important topic, and it's got really, I think it has a lot to do with branding and marketing. Really, it's like what we don't have the alternatives being created in the sexy ads that and listen, I have a background in creating those sexy ads for Audis and Porsches and whatnot. So I know that formula. I know what's behind it. And as a filmmaker, I know the power of the edit, right? So I think that what's missing in the world and we don't have enough of, and there's some of it out there and it's great to see it whenever it pops up, but we don't have enough of this alternative reminder of the natural world, the world that connects us to the planet, that, we're here on this planet. We emerged from this planet. We're connected to it. There's even, the idea of the Gaia principle that this is a being, that we're connected to this being, we're dreaming this reality together, and that is our future, and the artificial part of it is a distraction, which we needed to get to this point to step
Yeah.
into our true power. But we need to be reminded, we need someone to show us that. And who's doing that, right? I mean, these ads cost a lot of money. There's, all this stuff, someone's got to have the money for it. It's like the billionaires of the new world have to be willing to come forward and say, hey, let's squat together and let's actually create the marketing campaign and the branding for this new reality so that people can see what other alternatives are out there and that they're cool, right? I mean, look, people talk about time machines all the time, time travel. I mean, I'm guilty. I've done a lot of stuff about these crazy topics, right? But look, a book is a time machine. I mean, if you read like this book, like whatever, from Robert Temple and in 20, 30 years, it's like a time machine going back 20, 30 years to the consciousness that that individual had right here in the past, an analog form, of wood basically and ink that is in your hands that you could have that's almost indestructible if you take care and preserve it. And we have these time machines all around us in the books and the libraries that are unfortunately being neglected. But that is like this kind of stuff needs to be shown to the new generation, not just the plus 60s who are concerned about these things because they have the bandwidth to look back on enough time to see the degradation of society around them, but especially the young people, because you do these talks, and I'm sure Greg, you've noticed it. Most of the audiences are the older people and not the young people, right?
Yeah. Yeah, we've seen that, but another really interesting phenomenon, the young people that there are young people coming to, and I say young, it's some of them are teens coming with their parents, some of them are 20s and 30s. Uh, but they believe that the world has always been the way it is now because that's all they've ever seen.
Right.
They don't know that there was a time that the world wasn't at war like this, and we had much more freedom, and we had really cool muscle cars and really great music, really
Yeah.
great music that was it was a soundtrack of our daily lives that we shared. We don't have those things anymore. So I
Yeah.
think we nailed it, John. I think this is a good topic.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, Greg, you and I have talked. You're making the case for our previous conversation. It says this has got to, and Frank as well, is that this has got to turn into a media operation. This has
Yeah.
got to start to capture these ideas. And once you start to do that, then you have a tangible, a brand, if you will, that you can head toward a new direction. We'll all come back and we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks when we come back, and Penny will join us again. So thank you both for a delightful, always interesting conversation. And for all of you who are our viewers, thank you for being with us because we can only do this, and it's only worthwhile if we have all of you out there who are willing to participate and send us your questions and your comments too, because we will read them all and certainly uh, deal with and respond to those that we can. Uh, so let me just remind you that Quartet is a program of the Arlington Institute, which is a little think tank that we started 35 years ago here out then in Washington, D.C. area, now out 100 miles away in the Appalachian Mountains in West Virginia. And we have a variety of programs, and you can find out all about them at transitiontalks.org. And we and arlingtoninstitute.org. We have a newsletter called Future Edition, which has been published for, again, about 35 years now, that scans the horizon looking for new ideas and things that in many, many different sectors, and it's free and available to anybody. And Transition Talks is our speaker series, which we sponsor here in Berkeley Springs. An outside speaker like both Frank and Greg to every month to come here and address not only a local group, but also an international group through live streaming. And all of it is pointed toward uh, understanding, facilitating, and anticipating the new world that is we're full into the middle of. And what we're trying to do is, in our own way, be a bit of a lighthouse and illuminating kind of a path forward into this new space. And so we thank you all for being a part of this, and we hope that you'll come back and be with us again in a couple of weeks when we come back again and do this. And so thank you both for being a part of this conversation, and thank all of you who have joined us from around the world. We very much appreciate you all, and we look forward to seeing you again. Take care.
Thank you all. We love you all.
Thank you.